Hello, I'm Daniela. Today's video is a continuation in the Art Journaling 101 series. I'm showing another layout. Now this layout uses repetition, but we're going to focus on shapes to make abstract flowers. And not only are we going to use circles for the flowers, or at least a hint of a circle, we're also going to use arcs to give dimension, highlights, and shadows. And I can't wait to show you my process. So let's get going. So to start with, I've opened up my journal and I just clamped it in place. And now I'm going to start my art journal page. For the background, I chose a color very similar to the page color, but you can use any color that you like. You can totally change it. It could be black or pink or anything you want. But for this purpose, I'm trying to go with a very neutral tone. So that's why I have this color out. And then I need to choose a color, just a single color for the roses. They're very abstract. They're not really roses. Some people could say they're abstract peonies or something along those lines. But they're just an abstract flower, very circular shaped. I'm going to go with yellow for the roses. So to do that, I choose 3 shades of yellow. I just want them to be distinct. I can even just use one yellow and then mix it with another color to lighten it or darken it as I see, and I'll do a lot more blending besides. But I just have these 3 yellows here, a bright yellow, kind of a marigold, and then a lighter one. I'll show you them all on my palette. I have a couple of greens that I want to use for my leaves. Again, very simple colors and shapes. And then I have a very pale, almost a flesh tone, and a brighter orange. I'm going to use those a lot in my work. I'm also going to use black and white. So right now I'll fill my palette with the colors and then we can get started. So now to start with, I'm going to use just an old palette knife. This is a very old one that I have, just to smear some of that color on the background. And then I have brushes that I'm comfortable with. They're flat brushes. One is completely flat across, and these 2 have a slight angle. It's just that I'm comfortable with them. They're inexpensive brushes. This is a 1/2 inch, this is a 1/4 inch, this is a number 4. I'm going to start by taking my palette knife and taking some of my background color and just smearing it. And this gives me a wet surface to work with, but it also really starts the background process, which is what I want. Acrylic dries fairly quickly, so I like to work with it by creating that background fairly quickly. It doesn't have to be perfectly painted. The beauty of acrylic is you can build up over and over again with layers. So that's pretty good. And now I just want to create an odd number of my flowers. I'm just going to use 5 because I like that format. You can use any number you like, but I really like the number 5 here for this layout. I'm going to take some of my brightest yellow, my most dominant color yellow, and just sketch out the flowers. I like them to kind of be off center. So this is just going to be the first one. It's very large. And then I'll alter the sizes. This one comes over here. And so now just 2 more. Do a little one here and a small one over here. So I've just pieced out the placement. Well, I have a little of the yellow on my brush. I'm going to wipe it off. There'll still be paint on it. And I'm just going to kind of echo some of the shapes here on that background. I'll set my brush aside and I'm going to come back in with some of that background color and just smear it on top of these little colors that I added. I really like to have a little bit of that color peeking through. And then I'll take another brush. This is just a small dry brush, and just kind of blend that color. So I still see a little bit of that yellow, but it's not so dominant. I'll go all around here as well. I can work it flat, or I can leave a little bit of texture. Now the key with this is that I wanted any of those little bits of yellow to have the same direction as the shapes. I can even pick up a little more
and just kind of echo the shape. Here I echoed this one. I could have easily echoed this round one. I'll do that over here. And that's really nice. I'm going to let this layer dry so I have my background painted, as well as just place the main objects here. I'll wash my brushes, and when this is dry, we can start our next layer. So now this layer is mostly dry, and I'll show you on the large flower here how I go about creating it, and then I'll take you through the smaller one as well, just to give you an idea. Again, I'm using my largest brush here, the 1/2 inch brush. Use whatever size is appropriate for your journal. I'm going to go back in there with some of that yellow that we already used, and I'm going to start in the center, and I'm just going to make little kind of C-shaped little arcs, little curves, and I'm leaving a space between them. I'll go around the edge and kind of just overlap so my shape isn't perfectly round. And while I have it on the brush here, I'll do the same thing. I'll start in the middle, add a few little arcs here of this yellow. It looks good. While I have the brush, I'm going to do that off camera on the remaining 3 flowers. So there I have all my flowers with the next layer of yellow, just with those little arcs. Now, using my same brush, just going to wipe it off a little bit. I'm going to choose another color. I'll go in with this deeper, this what I called marigold color, more of a mustard yellow. And I'm going to come and I'm going to create those same arcs, overlapping a little bit on the flower that we already did. As I get to the outside, which is a little larger, I'm going to create those longer arcs. And on the center, it'll be smaller. I'll do that here as well. And you can really play around with how much you want to show of the different colors that you're using within your color family. I'll continue off screen, creating these little flowers. And now I'm going to go in there, again, wiping my brush just to remove some of the paint, and take that lightest color. And I'll continue with those little arcs. Now I'm really trying to work in the space in between the areas I've already added those little arcs from. This is just the base layer, and I'm really just trying to create a little bit of variation in color. So once I've completed all those first steps of my flowers, I'm going to let this layer dry. You can speed it along with a heat gun, or just give it a few minutes, maybe 20 minutes to dry. So now that this layer is mostly dried, I want to start building up my leaves. And I want to look at open spaces, and that's where I'll put some of these leaves. I only need really a hint of color to really make that leaf look like a leaf. These are starting to really look like flowers. I have 2 greens, a light and a dark. I'm going to take some of that darker green, and this time I'm using the smaller brush, the 1/4 inch. And I'm going to just take a little bit of that yellow and incorporate that in with the green. And this will work to kind of make our colors united. I can play around with how much green I want to add just to get the darkness that I'm looking for. And then I'll just make sure my brush is nice and neat. And I'm just going to come here and create just a little triangle with a little kind of flourish at the end. I'll go around the edge of the petal and just fill in just a portion of that. I'm not trying to fill it in completely. Keep playing around until I get the right size leaf and the shape that I like. And I'll do this on a few places. You can make sure that each flower has a leaf, or you can just do it occasionally. Again, sometimes it's best to stick to odd numbers. Now you can decide how many leaves you make. It really is up to you. It's up to the level of contrast you want with the color of the flower and the background. So now I'm just going to clean up my brush, and I'll take some of that lighter green and I'll just mix it in with a little bit of whatever I cleaned off my brush. And again, this unites the color. And now I'll just come around on the leaves that I've painted and just add some of that color here and there. Not worrying about blending it just yet. I'll work on blending it shortly after I add some of this color. I want to add this maybe on half of the leaf or even less. So once I have that down nicely, again, I'll work on cleaning off that brush. And on one side of the brush, I'm going to just dip in that lighter color. The other side, I'll dip in that darker color. And then when I pull the brush, it kind of makes a nice blend. And then I'll just see where I want to blend it. This way my leaf has a nice blend. Come back in, lighter color and the darker color, and just make a little bit of a blend here. It's supposed to look a little rough. You don't even have to blend it if you don't want, but I like that effect. Then I'll come in with some of that dark color that I haven't mixed and just lightly add a little bit of that. It creates a shadow and it adds something, just a little bit of depth, a little shadow. Now I'm going to take my brush and really try and remove a lot of the color, and with a very light hand, just going to put in some colors around the main shape, maybe a few on the edges as well. And now I'm going to take a clean brush. This is the first one that I use, the larger brush. Pick up some of whatever color I used on the background and just blend it in, trying to give a little layer over that color I just put down, but I like a little bit of it to peek through as well. Come back in with some green on my brush, a very light hand. Put that down, and then take that background color and just help it to blend out. Really want it to be a suggestion in the background, not dominate anything. Just a little hint back there. So that's coming out well. I'm going to clean my brushes, and then we'll start adding details to the center of the flowers and some little highlights as well. So I've added white and black to my palette, and now I can start creating just the hint of the center of the flowers. Taking my small number 4 brush, the flat shader, just dipping it in a little black and then brushing it off so that I have a nice sharp edge. And now I'm just going to start in the center, and I'm going to make those little shapes that we made, those little arcs, letter C. And I continue to come back here because I really want to control what I'm using on my brush. Once I'm happy with the center, I'll just take a light hand and kind of just use whatever's on the brush to give a little dimension right outside the center. You could go in there and fill in a little more of the center if you like. Then I'm going to continue to come back out here, reload my brush, make a nice sharp edge, and I'm just going to trace some of the shapes that I've made. Some of these petals, really making them stand out. Again, always coming back to sharpen that brush. And you don't have to create every petal. You can leave a lot to the imagination. But I always like to start in the center and then just go around enhancing that shape. And I'll continue this on all of the roses. So I'm quite pleased with that. I like the way the center looks. I like the little hint of the petal shape. So now I'm going to take my brush, really try and get most of the paint off. And then again, very lightly, just kind of smear a little bit of the brush and then just blend it out a little. Again, I'm following the shapes of the flowers that I'm echoing, trying not to cross over any of the other colors I've used in the past. So none of that yellow or green. I'm just barely brushing it on. If I think I went too far, then I'll dip in with my background color and blend it out a little. So now I've cleaned my brush thoroughly. Still want to use that flat shader, and using that same technique, I'm going to take a little bit of white on the brush. And instead of doing a very small line around the petals just yet, I'm going to just take that brush and just echo that shape, that little petal shape here and there. Again, trying to keep it curved and long. Not too many on each flower, just enough to really add a little highlight. I can go off the flower as well. Just like the way that adds another dimension and a little brightness to each of the flowers. So lastly, I'm just going to dip my brush right in that white, get a nice sharp edge, and just kind of make a few little petals with a very thin line around the flowers. You could take this as far as you'd like. So here you can stop at any point. I just want to take it a little further. I want a little more yellow in the background. So I'm taking my 1/4 inch brush here and dipping half of it in the background color that I painted, and just a little bit on the other side in yellow, and then I drag it straight through. And this produces a nice little blend. And with a very light hand, I'm just going to echo the shape that I want to emulate here. I can decide exactly where I want it. I'm going to come back in just with a little bit of the background only, and just change up any areas that I think have too much of a color. I like the background to still look nice and light. So I'm really pleased with how this came out. And this is my final look for this art journal layout. It's just simple abstract flowers, choose a color, use a few shades of it, and then just a simple hint of leaves.
So that's how I create another layout in my art journal. Using acrylic paints is very forgiving. I can build up layers, correct mistakes, add a little something, a little depth to my paintings. I find this very helpful. I'll include all the links, all the videos in this series in the description. And if you'd like some more behind the scenes content and additional videos, consider becoming a member of my channel. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.